The shuttle's descent through Vareth Prime's atmosphere always reminded Adrian Wells of falling through liquid mercury. Outside the viewport, violet clouds streaked past in ribbons of luminescent gas, remnants of the stellar wind that bathed this world in perpetual twilight. 3 moons hung visible even in daylight, their gravitational dance responsible for the strange tidal patterns that had shaped Vareth architecture over millennia. "You're certain this is purely observational?" Adrian asked, not for the first time that morning. His liaison, a Vareth diplomat named Thuron, whose ceremonial armor caught the shuttle's interior lighting in fractured rainbows, made a sound that might have been amusement. The Vareth had this way of laughing that sounded like wind chimes being strangled. "Dr. Wells, I have explained 3 times now. The Proving Ground ceremony is open to scholarly observation. You will sit in the academic gallery. You will take notes. You will not be expected to lift anything heavier than your data pad." Thuron's long ears twitched, a gesture Adrian had learned meant the Vareth found him endearing in the way humans found anxious house pets endearing. "Right, just making sure. Last time you said something was purely ceremonial. I ended up having to drink fermented fresh milk in front of the Merchant Council. That was a diplomatic necessity. I was sick for 3 days. Your digestive system adapted. Character building, as you humans say." The shuttle touched down on a landing platform that extended from one of Vareth Prime's signature crystalline spires. These weren't buildings in any conventional sense. They were grown over centuries, coaxed from the planet's silicon-rich geology through biotechnology Adrian only partially understood. The Vareth had been manipulating matter at the molecular level while humans were still figuring out bronze. Adrian gathered his equipment, checking twice that his translation implant was functioning. The device sat behind his left ear, a piece of technology that represented humanity's single greatest contribution to interspecies relations. It didn't just translate words. It conveyed context, cultural nuance, even emotional subtext. Without it, he'd have been utterly lost during his 6 months here. The royal arena revealed itself gradually as they walked through corridors carved from living stone. Adrian had been to numerous Vareth sites, but this one carried weight even he could feel. Symbols etched into the walls glowed with bioluminescence, telling stories of ancient trials, legendary warriors, bloodlines stretching back before humanity had left Earth's cradle. The air itself felt thick with history, almost oppressive. "The Proving Grounds," Thuron explained as they emerged into an antechamber, "determined status, marriage rights, inheritance claims. To the Vareth, these trials are not entertainment. They are the mechanism by which we sort excellence from mediocrity." Sounds harsh. Sounds honest. Your people's custom of allowing anyone to marry anyone regardless of proven worth strikes us as chaos. We call it love. We call it inefficient resource distribution. They emerged into the arena proper, and Adrian's breath caught despite himself. The space was massive, easily containing 50,000 spectators in tiered seating that spiraled up toward the open sky. The floor was polished stone that shifted colors, reactive minerals that changed hue based on temperature, pressure, even electromagnetic fields. At the far end, an elevated platform held the royal box, currently empty but draped in banners that rippled with embedded photonic threads. The academic gallery proved to be a small section off to one side, already occupied by a handful of Vareth scholars who regarded Adrian's arrival with that peculiar mix of curiosity and condescension he'd grown accustomed to. To them, humans were technologically impressive but physically laughable. They built marvelous starships but couldn't survive the basic trials that Vareth adolescents completed as rites of passage. Adrian found a seat and activated his data pad, pulling up his notes on Vareth's social structure. He'd been studying their culture for years before the diplomatic mission, had written 3 papers on their honor-based legal system, yet being here, surrounded by the reality of it, made all his academic understanding feel theoretical and distant. The arena began filling rapidly. Verath citizens streamed in, their skin tones ranging from pearl white to deep silver, their builds universally imposing by human standards. Most stood a head taller than Adrian, with proportions that suggested both grace and strength. Those distinctive long ears, sweeping back from their heads in elegant curves, seemed to orient constantly, tracking sounds with predatory precision. "Quite a turnout," Adrian muttered. One of the Verath scholars, an elderly female whose ears had begun to droop with age, leaned toward him. "The princess herself will preside. That alone draws thousands. She has not attended the trials in 2 years. Princess Kalara." Adrian had heard the name, of course. Everyone had. Heir to the throne, military commander, diplomatic negotiator, the list of her accomplishments filled entire databases. "The same. You are fortunate, human. She is considered the finest exemplar of our people's ideals." A trumpet blast cut through the arena's growing chatter, the sound produced by some instrument Adrian couldn't identify. It resonated in his chest cavity, seemed to vibrate his bones. The crowd rose as one, and Adrian scrambled to follow, suddenly aware of how out of place he appeared in his utilitarian jumpsuit among all this ceremonial armor. The royal box filled with dignitaries, and then she entered. Princess Kalara moved with the kind of unconscious authority that couldn't be taught, only inherited and refined through decades of expectation. Her skin held a luminous quality, catching light like moonlight on water. Dark hair fell past her shoulders, woven with threads that sparked softly, more photonic decoration, marking her status. She wore armor that somehow managed to be both functional and ceremonial, fitted perfectly to her tall frame. But it was her ears that truly marked her royalty, longer than any Adrian had seen, swept back in perfect symmetry, their tips adorned with rings of what looked like crystallized starlight. She surveyed the arena with an expression of calm assessment, and Adrian felt absurdly grateful he was tucked away in the academic gallery, far from that penetrating gaze. The ceremony began with ritual declarations he only half followed despite his implant's best efforts. Warriors entered the arena floor, each announced with full lineage and accomplishments. They were impressive, intimidating, clearly the products of lifetimes spent preparing for exactly this moment. Adrian was making notes on the fighting styles displayed in preliminary demonstrations when Thuron appeared at his elbow, looking distinctly uncomfortable. "Dr. Wells, we may have a small administrative complication." Something in the Verath's tone made Adrian's stomach drop. "Define small. Are you familiar with the registration protocols for ceremonial observers?" "No, because you told me you'd handle all that." "Yes, well, there appears to have been a translation error in the documentation." Adrian's implant was feeding him, increasing levels of alarm from Thuron's subvocal cues. "What kind of error?" "The sort where your presence was registered in the participant database rather than the observer database." For a moment, Adrian's brain simply refused to process this information. "I'm sorry, what?" "Your name, Dr. Adrian Wells, is currently listed among the trial competitors. The sealing ceremony has already occurred. By Verath protocol, once names are sealed, they cannot be withdrawn without." "Thuron, I am a xenoanthropologist. I study cultures. I can't. Have you seen these people? They could fold me into origami." "I am aware of your physical limitations, yes." "Then fix this." "I am attempting to navigate the bureaucratic channels, but the protocols are quite specific, and given the princess's presence, everything has been elevated to maximum formality, which means additional layers of authorization are required, and..." The trumpet sounded again. A Verath official had entered the arena floor, carrying what looked like a crystalline tablet that projected names in flowing script 20 feet tall. Adrian watched in mounting horror as his name appeared among the competitors, rendered in symbols his implant helpfully translated in his peripheral vision. 50,000 Verath fell silent, then erupted in confused chatter. From the royal box, Princess Kelara leaned forward slightly, her long ears orienting toward the projected names. Even from this distance, Adrian could see her expression shift from formal interest to puzzlement. "Dr. Wells," Thuron said quietly, "I believe you should prepare to greet the arena. Protocol requires all registered participants to present themselves when called. This isn't happening. This is a nightmare. I'm going to wake up and—" His name echoed across the arena in the announcer's resonant voice, butchered slightly in pronunciation, but unmistakably his. "I strongly suggest you waive," Thuron hissed. Adrian stood on shaking legs and managed a weak gesture toward the arena floor. The crowd's reaction was immediate and diverse: confusion, amusement, scattered laughter. He caught glimpses of warriors turning to locate the source of this absurdity, their expressions ranging from bewilderment to open mockery. In the royal box, Princess Kelara's gaze found him. For one excruciating moment, their eyes met across the vast space, and Adrian saw intelligence analyzing this unexpected development, trying to understand what bizarre circumstance had placed a human among warriors. She said something to an advisor, who replied with animated gestures. Her expression shifted into something that might have been the beginning of amusement. Adrian sat down hard, his heart hammering against his ribs. "On the bright side," he muttered to nobody in particular, "this will make an excellent paper if I survive it." The administrative offices beneath the royal arena smelled like ozone, and something organic Adrian couldn't identify. He sat in a waiting chamber while Thuron argued with a succession of increasingly senior bureaucrats, each more inflexible than the last. Through the translucent walls, some kind of smart material that shifted opacity based on privacy requirements, Adrian watched Verath officials gesture emphatically, their long ears flicking in patterns his implant tagged as extreme irritation. "This is absurd," he said to the human attaché who'd arrived 20 minutes earlier, a severe woman named Morrison who looked like she wanted to strangle him. "Surely there's an exception for clerical errors." "You'd think so, wouldn't you?" Morrison's fingers danced across her data pad, pulling up legal references that scrolled past faster than Adrian could read. "But Verath law regarding the trials is older than most human civilizations. Once the sealing ceremony completes, withdrawal requires approval from 3 separate councils, none of which are currently in session, and won't be for another 6 standard days." 6 days, the trials start tomorrow. "I'm aware of the timeline, Dr. Wells." Adrian dropped his head into his hands. Outside, he could hear the arena crowds dispersing, their voices carrying through ventilation systems that efficiently moved air through the massive structure. Somewhere in that crowd, thousands of Verath were probably laughing about the absurd human who'd somehow stumbled into their sacred competition. Thuron emerged from the administrative maze looking defeated, his ceremonial armor somehow appearing disheveled despite being made of rigid materials. "The High Administrator suggests you simply fail the first trial. Elimination removes you from the competition with no legal complications." "How comforting. What's the first trial?" "Combat demonstration against a mid-tier warrior. You would be eliminated within moments. And by eliminated you mean the weapons are calibrated to stun rather than kill. You would be unconscious, possibly injured but alive. Probably." "Probably." Verath physiology handles the stun settings well. Human physiology. Thuron's ears drooped apologetically. "Less data available." Morrison looked up sharply. "Absolutely not. If a human diplomat is injured in a Verath trial, the political fallout would be catastrophic. We've spent years building this relationship." "Then what do you suggest?" Adrian felt hysteria creeping into his voice. "I can't fight them. I can't withdraw. And apparently I can't just not show up without insulting the entire planet." "We're exploring diplomatic channels," Morrison said, which Adrian recognized as bureaucratic speak, for we have no idea what to do. The door opened, admitting a Verath official whose armor bore marks indicating high rank. Her ears swept back in a gesture Adrian's implant tagged as formal address. Dr. Wells, the princess requests your presence in the royal gallery. The room fell silent. Even Morrison looked stunned. The princess. Adrian's voice came out higher than intended. As in Princess Kalara, as in heir to the throne princess. We have only one princess human. You will follow me. Adrian looked helplessly at Morrison, who made a shooing gesture. Don't insult her. Don't touch anything. Try not to cause an interstellar incident. Great advice. Very specific, extremely helpful, Adrian muttered, following the official into corridors that grew progressively more ornate. The stone here had been worked with incredible precision, creating patterns that seemed to shift as he walked past. Bioluminescent organisms in the walls pulsed gently, providing light that felt organic and alive. They ascended through levels Adrian hadn't known existed, finally emerging in a gallery that overlooked the now empty arena. The space was smaller than he'd expected, intimate despite its obvious grandeur. Furniture that looked grown rather than built curved up from the floor. Windows of that same smart material showed the arena below, the city beyond, and the violet sky where 3 moons hung in their eternal configuration. Princess Kalara stood at the window, her back to him, hands clasped behind her. She'd removed the ceremonial armor, wearing instead something simpler that still managed to convey absolute authority. Her long ears tracked his entrance before she turned. Dr. Adrian Wells, she said, and her voice carried harmonics his implant struggled to fully convey. Please sit. I've been reading your academic work. Your analysis of our marriage customs is entertainingly wrong in several key areas. Adrian sat carefully on furniture that adjusted to his smaller frame. I appreciate the feedback, Your Highness, though I'd hoped for a more conventional peer review process. Her mouth quirked, the first genuine expression he'd seen from her. You have a sense of humor. Good, you'll need it. She moved to sit across from him, the motion fluid and controlled. I understand you did not intend to enter the trials. That's correct. There was a documentation error. My liaison is attempting to resolve it through proper channels. Your liaison will fail. The bureaucracy around the trials exists specifically to prevent manipulation. Once registered, always registered. It's designed to stop powerful families from inserting or removing competitors based on political advantage. I'm not trying to gain political advantage. I'm trying to not get killed. A reasonable goal. She studied him with unsettling intensity, those luminous eyes seeming to catalog every detail. Tell me, Dr. Wells, what do you know about the cultural significance of the trials? Adrian's academic instincts kicked in despite his anxiety. They're more than competition. They're social sorting mechanisms, ways to prove genetic fitness, demonstrations of worth that determine everything from marriage eligibility to inheritance rights. Victory brings status, defeat brings shame, and the whole system reinforces your society's emphasis on proven capability over inherited privilege. Adequate summary. Now tell me what your presence represents. Adrian hesitated. An embarrassment. To you, perhaps. To others, you represent something more complex. There are factions among my people who see humanity as weak, technologically clever but physically inferior, unworthy of true partnership. Your presence in the trials, however accidental, becomes symbolic. Symbolic of what? That depends entirely on what happens next. She stood, moving back to the window. If you withdraw, assuming that becomes possible, you confirm their prejudices. Humans are clever but cowardly, unable to face real challenges. If you enter and are quickly eliminated, the same conclusion follows. Either way, our alliance suffers. Adrian felt cold despite the room's comfortable temperature. And if I somehow don't fail immediately, then you become interesting. She turned back to him. I've watched your species for years, Dr. Wells. Humanity compensates for physical limitations with remarkable ingenuity. You solve problems in ways we would never consider. It's simultaneously your greatest strength and the reason many of my people dismiss you. With respect, Your Highness, understanding my species doesn't help me survive combat with warriors who have trained their entire lives. No, it doesn't. She returned to her seat, leaning forward slightly. Which is why I'm going to offer you something unprecedented. The trials test more than combat ability. They test strategic thinking, problem-solving, adaptability under pressure. These are qualities humans excel at. If you're willing to actually compete rather than simply fail, I can ensure you face trial configurations that favor intelligence over strength. Adrian stared at her. Why would you do that? Because this situation, however accidental, presents an opportunity. If a human can succeed in our trials through wit and adaptability, it changes the conversation about our alliance. It demonstrates that different forms of strength have value. And if I fail anyway, then at least you tried, which is more dignified than withdrawal. But I don't think you'll fail, Dr. Wells. I've read your work. You notice patterns others miss. You find solutions in unexpected places. These are trial-winning qualities. Adrian's mind raced through implications. What do you gain from this? She smiled, and it carried edges he couldn't quite read. I gain evidence that our alliance with humanity is built on genuine mutual capability, not charity toward a weaker species. I gain political ammunition against isolationist factions. And frankly, I gain entertainment. The trials have become predictable. You represent chaos. I'm flattered to be your chaos agent. You should be. It's a rare honor. She stood, indicating the meeting was ending. The opening ceremony is tomorrow at dawn. You'll be expected to present yourself with the other competitors. I suggest you spend tonight reviewing Verath trial law. There are loopholes and precedents that favor cleverness. Find them. Adrian rose, his legs unsteady. Your Highness, I have to ask, is there any actual rule that says I have to do this? Something written down, legally binding? Several, actually, but that's not why you'll compete. Her ears tilted forward, a gesture his implant marked as friendly challenge. You'll compete because you're curious, because despite your fear, part of you wants to prove that a human can surprise us. I recognized it the moment I saw your face in the gallery. Not just fear, but excitement. She was right, and Adrian hated that she was right. Some reckless part of his brain was already analyzing the problem, looking for angles and approaches. This is insane, he said. Yes, Princess Kelara agreed. But it's the interesting kind of insane. I'll see you at dawn, Dr. Wells. Try not to die. Your academic work, while flawed, deserves a rebuttal publication. Adrian was escorted back through winding corridors, his mind spinning. Morrison was waiting in the administrative chamber, looking ready to either hug him or hit him. What did she say? She thinks I should actually compete. That's the worst advice I've ever heard. Probably. Adrian sat down heavily. But she's not wrong about the symbolism. If I run away, it confirms every negative stereotype about humans. At least if I try, I go down swinging. You'll go down unconscious, and you're going to get destroyed. Yes, but maybe I can make them work for it first. Adrian spent the night in his quarters, reviewing trial footage until his eyes burned. The Verath competed with a brutal elegance that made his chest tight with anxiety. Warriors moved like flowing water, their strikes precise and devastating. He watched a competitor named Thrace disarm 3 opponents in under 30 seconds. Another trial showed a warrior solving a tactical puzzle while under simulated attack, her mind somehow processing strategy while her body fought on autopilot. I'm going to die, he muttered, pausing another video. I'm going to die in front of 50,000 aliens who think humans are adorable but useless. His comm chirped. Thuron's face appeared, looking exhausted. Dr. Wells, I've compiled the legal precedents you requested. There are irregularities you might exploit. Irregularities. Trial law permits alternative solution paths. A competitor named Varix won the strategy trial 3 centuries ago, by negotiating with his opponents rather than defeating them. Another Shala completed the endurance trial by reinterpreting the victory conditions. The rules are ancient and sometimes contradictory. Adrian felt a flicker of hope. So victory doesn't always mean beating someone unconscious. Correct. It means achieving the trial's stated objective. How you achieve it is theoretically flexible. Theoretically, in practice, most competitors use traditional methods because they're Varath warriors raised in combat traditions. They don't think creatively about alternatives. But a human might. A human would have no choice. Thuron's ears drooped sympathetically. I apologize again for the registration error. This was never meant to happen. I know. Get some sleep, Thuron. One of us should be coherent tomorrow. Dawn arrived too quickly. Adrian dressed in the competition uniform Thuron had provided, lightweight armor that adjusted to his smaller frame but still felt absurdly inadequate. The material was some kind of smart fabric that hardened on impact, designed to prevent lethal injury while allowing competitors to feel the consequences of their mistakes. The walk to the arena felt like a death march. Other competitors gathered in the staging area, towering figures who eyed him with expressions ranging from confusion to outright amusement. One warrior, built like a mountain with ears that swept back aggressively, approached him. "You are the human, not a question. Adrian Wells, pleasure to meet you. I am Corex. I will try not to hurt you too badly when we fight." "That's very considerate. I'll try not to bore you with my inevitable defeat." Corex made that wind chime laugh sound. "You have humor, good. You will need it to endure the shame." The competitors were called to the arena floor in groups. Adrian found himself in the third wave, which gave him time to watch others and feel progressively more terrified. The arena had transformed overnight. Sections of the floor had risen or fallen, creating a three-dimensional combat space. Holographic markers indicated different trial zones. The crowd was even larger than yesterday, word having spread about the human competitor. Princess Kelara sat in the royal box, surrounded by advisors and dignitaries. She caught his eye briefly, and Adrian thought he saw the faintest nod of acknowledgement. The first trial was announced, personal combat. Adrian's stomach dropped. Of course it was combat. Why would fate offer him anything else? But then the trial master explained the objective, and Adrian's mind started racing. Competitors weren't required to defeat opponents. They had to retrieve a marker stone from the center of a combat zone while other competitors tried to stop them. Victory meant obtaining the stone and returning it to your starting position. How you accomplished this was your choice. Adrian watched the first round. A massive Varath warrior named Thrace simply bulldozed through opponents, absorbing hits while driving forward with pure strength. She grabbed the stone and fought her way back to wild applause. The second competitor tried a similar approach and got mobbed by three others working together. He failed, unconscious before reaching the stone. Adrian's group was called. 5 competitors including him, 1 stone, chaos about to begin. He positioned himself at his starting marker, analyzing the space. The other 4 competitors were already eyeing each other, calculating threats. Nobody paid him attention. To them, he was a non-factor, a joke that would eliminate itself. The start signal sounded, a pulse of energy that rippled through the air. The 4 Varath warriors charged toward the center, converging on the stone. Adrian ran perpendicular to them, sprinting for the arena's edge where the floor had risen into elevated platforms. His shorter legs protested, but he pushed hard, reaching the platform as combat erupted behind him. He scrambled up, his climbing skills honed from years of archaeological fieldwork actually useful for once, and gained elevation. From here he could see the entire combat zone. The 4 warriors had become a tangled mess of fighting, each trying to reach the stone while preventing others from doing the same. Adrian ran along the elevated path, circling the combat. The crowd's noise shifted, some noticing his unconventional route. He reached a point directly across from his starting position, the stone visible below where Korax had just grabbed it, only to be tackled by two others. The platform ended at a gap. Below, the combat raged. Ahead, another platform, too far to jump normally. But there was a support strut, and the smart floor material responded to pressure and impact. Adrian pulled off his boot and threw it hard at the strut's base. The impact triggered the reactive floor, which briefly hardened and expanded. In that split second, Adrian jumped, using the momentarily extended surface as a stepping stone. He barely made it to the far platform, landing hard and rolling. The crowd's murmur grew louder. Princess Kelara leaned forward in her box. Adrian kept moving, working his way around the perimeter while the warriors below battered each other. Korax had the stone again but was surrounded. Adrian spotted his opportunity, a maintenance access point in the elevated platform, designed for arena staff to adjust floor configurations. He pried it open, dropping into a service tunnel that ran beneath the arena floor. His implant's mapping function activated, showing him the tunnel network. He navigated by feel and memory, moving in what he hoped was the right direction. He emerged through another access point near the center of the combat zone, popping up behind the clustered warriors. Korax still had the stone but was trapped in a defensive position. The other three surrounded him, coordinating their attack. Adrian did something monumentally stupid. He whistled. All four warriors turned, startled. In that moment of confusion, Korax's grip loosened slightly. Adrian darted forward, dove between a warrior's legs, grabbed the stone from Korax's hand, and rolled away before anyone processed what happened. The crowd erupted. Adrian scrambled to his feet, the stone clutched to his chest and ran. Not toward his starting position. The warriors had recovered and were coming for him, but toward the nearest elevated platform. He jumped, caught the edge, pulled himself up with desperate strength. Below, the Verath warriors converged on his position, but they were built for ground combat, trained in traditional fighting. The platforms required climbing, and their heavier builds made them slower at it. Adrian ran across the elevated path, jumping gaps, using every trick he'd learned in archaeological digs, where one wrong step meant falling into excavation pits. Behind him, warriors climbed in pursuit, but he'd gained precious seconds. He could see his starting marker ahead, just 30 meters, 20. Korax had reached the platforms and was closing fast. Adrian could hear the warriors breathing, feel the vibration of pursuit through the smart floor. 10 meters. Korax's hand grasped for his shoulder. Adrian dropped flat, sliding across the smooth platform surface. Korax's momentum carried him forward off balance. Adrian rolled to the side, letting the warrior pass, then scrambled back to his feet. 5 meters. He jumped down to the arena floor, his ankles screaming in protest. Stumbled, recovered, dove forward. His hand slapped his starting marker with the stone pressed against it. The signal sounded. Victory. Silence crashed over the arena like a physical force. 50,000 Verath stared in stunned disbelief. A human had just won a personal combat trial using tactics they'd never considered, speed they'd dismissed as inadequate, and opportunism they hadn't expected. Then Princess Kelara stood. She began to clap, the sound sharp and deliberate in the silence. Slowly, sections of the crowd joined her. Not everyone, plenty of Verath, looked outraged or confused, but enough to create a rolling wave of applause. Adrian lay on the arena floor, lungs burning, every muscle trembling. Korax approached and extended a hand. Adrian took it, letting the warrior pull him upright. That, Korax said, was the most cowardly, dishonorable, clever victory I have ever witnessed. I am impressed and insulted simultaneously. I'll take it, Adrian gasped. Are you going to hit me now? No, you won legitimately. That is what matters. Korax's ears tilted in what might have been respect. Though I will request to face you again in later trials. I wish to learn how your strange human mind works. Adrian was escorted from the arena floor, his legs barely functioning. Morrison met him in the competitor's tunnel, her face cycling through 6 different emotions. That was the stupidest, most brilliant thing I've ever seen. Earth Command is going to have opinions. So many opinions. Did I actually win? You actually won. The trial objective was obtaining the stone and returning it to your marker. You accomplished that. The method doesn't matter legally. What happens now? Now you face the remaining trials. There are 6 more, each progressively harder, and Dr. Wells, Morrison's expression turned serious. You've made yourself interesting to people who weren't paying attention before. That comes with complications. In the royal box, Princess Kelara stood at the window, watching Adrian's retreating form. An advisor approached, concern evident in the set of his ears. Princess, the human's victory is causing significant reaction. Conservative factions are already protesting the validity of his tactics. His tactics were legally sound and creatively executed. That's exactly the point. Some are saying the trials should be adjusted to prevent such unconventional approaches. Kelara turned, her expression sharp. Then those individuals misunderstand the purpose of the trials. We test adaptability, not just strength. The human demonstrated both. If our warriors can't adapt to unexpected tactics, they deserve to lose. She looked back toward the arena floor where workers were resetting the space for the next round. A small smile played at her lips. Inform the trial masters. I want to observe all of Dr. Wells's remaining trials personally. This has become interesting. 3 trials remained, and Adrian survived each through increasingly desperate improvisation. The strategy trial became a negotiation exercise when he convinced 2 competitors that eliminating each other served no purpose, and proposed a cooperative solution that satisfied the objective while preserving everyone's honor. The endurance trial nearly killed him until he realized the victory condition specified, remaining in the designated zone, but not remaining conscious. He jury-rigged a harness from his equipment that kept him physically present while his body shut down from exhaustion. But it was the trial of resolve that changed everything. Adrian stood in the preparation chamber, his body a collection of bruises and strained muscles. Morrison had tried to talk him into medical withdrawal after the endurance trial, but something stubborn in him refused. He'd made it this far through luck and lateral thinking. One more trial remained. Thuron entered, his expression grim. Dr. Wells, I've received intelligence from allies in the court. There are elements who find your success problematic. They believe you're making a mockery of sacred traditions. I'm just trying not to die. They don't see it that way. They see a human demonstrating that Verath's superiority might be circumstantial rather than absolute. Some find this intolerable. Adrian's implant caught the subtext Thuron wasn't stating directly. You're saying someone might try to ensure I fail. I'm saying the trial of resolve is less monitored than others. Accidents could happen. Fantastic. What does this trial even involve? It varies. The trial masters design it specifically to test each competitor's psychological breaking point. It adapts to the individual. So I'm walking into a custom-designed nightmare, possibly with sabotage included. Yes, I'm sorry. I wish I had better news. The call came an hour later. Adrian walked to the arena floor where a single doorway had opened in the stone wall, leading into darkness. The other finalists had already completed their trials. 2 had succeeded, 3 had failed. All looked traumatized in ways they refused to discuss. Princess Kelara stood from her seat in the royal box. Dr. Adrian Wells, you face the final trial. Enter and prove your resolve. May your spirit remain unbroken. Adrian stepped through the doorway into a corridor that sealed behind him. The darkness was absolute for 3 heartbeats, then lights activated in sequence, leading him forward. The passage twisted, descended, the air growing cooler and carrying scents that triggered unease in his primate hindbrain. The corridor opened into a chamber that defied physics. The space seemed to extend impossibly in multiple directions, walls curved in ways that hurt to look at directly. At the center, A platform floated in apparent defiance of gravity. On it a crystalline structure pulsed with light. "Objective," a voice announced from everywhere and nowhere. "Retrieve the resonance crystal and return it to the entry point. Trial begins now." Adrian stepped toward the platform, and the floor vanished beneath his feet. He fell through darkness that somehow had texture, felt resistance that wasn't quite physical. His mind screamed, but his body experienced no impact, no sensation of falling, just motion through impossible space. Then he was standing on the platform, the crystal before him, his stomach trying to catch up with the rest of him. He reached for the crystal, and the chamber filled with images. His father, disappointed in his career choice. His mother, worried he'd waste his potential on alien worlds. Colleagues who dismissed his theories, called his work derivative, blocked his funding proposals. Every failure, every rejection, every moment of inadequacy played out in holographic detail around him. Adrian's hand stopped inches from the crystal. This was the trial. Not physical challenge, but psychological warfare, forcing him to confront his doubts while completing the objective. "Clever," he muttered, "but I've had therapy. I know these insecurities. They're old friends at this point." He grabbed the crystal and the chamber exploded into chaos. The platform began moving, rotating through impossible angles. The projections intensified, now showing potential futures, versions of himself failing, returning to Earth in disgrace, his academic career destroyed by this interstellar humiliation. The Verath laughing at human weakness, his species judged inadequate because he couldn't complete simple trials. Adrian's grip tightened on the crystal. "You know what? Fine. Maybe I do fail. Maybe this ends badly. But at least I tried something interesting." The chamber shifted again. Now the projections showed Princess Kalara, her expression cold with disappointment. "You were a curiosity, nothing more. Your species remains inferior." "Oh, that's definitely not real," Adrian said to the empty air. "She wouldn't say something that clumsy. The actual princess has much better rhetorical skills." A new presence entered the chamber. 3 Verath warriors materialized on separate platforms, their armor marked with insignias Adrian didn't recognize. Their eyes held a flatness that triggered his threat assessment instincts. "Dr. Wells," one said, voice distorted, "you have embarrassed us enough. The trial ends here." Thuron's warning crystallized into reality. These weren't projections. They were real, physical saboteurs who'd entered the trial space. Adrian backed to the edge of his platform. "You realize this is illegal. Pretty sure murdering competitors during trials violates multiple laws." "Accidents happen. Humans are fragile. You took a risk entering our sacred trials." The warrior drew a weapon, not a training device but something that hummed with lethal intent. The platform lurched. Adrian stumbled, barely keeping his balance. The warriors began jumping between platforms, closing distance with predatory patience. His mind raced. He was unarmed, exhausted, and outmatched. The crystal in his hand pulsed warmly, its energy signature registering on his implant sensors. It was broadcasting something, a signal, a frequency that resonated with the chamber's architecture. The chamber that defied physics, that existed in impossible spatial configurations, that responded to the crystal's presence. Adrian did something he'd learned from watching too many trial recordings. He trusted his ridiculous human intuition. He threw the crystal, not at the warriors, into the empty space between platforms where physics broke down and reality bent. The crystal tumbled through impossible angles, its broadcast signal amplifying as it interacted with the chamber's exotic geometry. The space convulsed, platforms lurched wildly. The warriors, trained for normal physics, lost their balance. One fell into the void and vanished. The others grabbed for stability. Adrian jumped. He had no idea where he'd land or if he'd land at all, but staying put meant death. He fell through the distorted space, reality twisting around him, his implant screaming warnings his conscious mind couldn't process. He hit something solid, the entry corridor. He'd somehow traversed the impossible distance by trusting the crystal's interaction with broken physics. The crystal itself materialized in his hand, pulled through whatever spatial shortcut he'd accidentally created. Behind him, the chamber was collapsing, its exotic geometry destabilizing. The two remaining warriors were trapped inside, their shouts cut off as the space sealed itself. Adrian ran down the corridor, his body moving on pure adrenaline. He burst through the doorway into the arena and collapsed, the crystal rolling from his hand to stop against the objective marker. Silence. Then pandemonium. Princess Kelara was on her feet, speaking rapidly to the High Arbiter. Security forces flooded the arena floor. Medical teams rushed toward Adrian, who waved them off weakly. "I'm okay. Mostly. There were people in there, warriors. They tried to kill me." "We know," Kelara said, appearing beside him with speed that defied her apparent calm. "We were monitoring. The moment they entered, we began intervention protocols, but you'd already escaped." "How did you escape?" "Threw the crystal into the weird physics, followed it through the spatial distortion, hoped for the best." "That should have killed you." "Yeah, I'm getting that a lot lately." Adrian sat up slowly. "Did I complete the trial?" The High Arbiter approached, his ancient face unreadable. "You retrieved the crystal and returned it to the entry point. The objective is satisfied. However, there is the matter of the assassination attempt." "Not my fault. People don't like creative problem-solving." "No," the Arbiter's expression softened infinitesimally. "But it is rare. In 3 centuries of trials, we have never seen a competitor weaponize the trial architecture itself. We have never seen someone complete the trial of resolve by choosing to trust chaos over certainty." Princess Kelara stepped forward, addressing the crowd. "Dr. Adrian Wells has completed all trials successfully through methods that challenge our assumptions about strength, victory, and worth. Some find this troubling. I find it exactly what these trials were meant to test: the ability to adapt, to think beyond tradition, to find victory through qualities we may have forgotten to value." She turned to Adrian, and something shifted in her expression, calculation mixing with genuine respect. "But there is one final matter. Before the trials began, I made a careless joke. I said if the human somehow won, I would be his wife forever." The arena fell silent. Adrian's exhausted brain took several seconds to process this information. I mean, you were joking, obviously joking." Everyone understood that. The High